So it's been requested that I do a write-up on the MQ valve in the Racegun, and right here I have two MQ valves. On the right I have the MQ1, the original, and on the left I have the MQ2, which is the updated. I'll go ahead and start out before I install it, just showing some of the differences. As you can see here, the MQ1 is kind of a lower quality build, straight aluminum, nothing very special about it, not even anodized. This wire right here, I've put a protective coating on it, but if you get it stock, there's not even a protective coating on it. They had a lot of problems with sheared wires. People would cut the wires on these things accidentally in a lot of models. Just so you can get an idea of what the inside looks like, basically what we've got here is a solenoid with a spring and a disc on it that stops the air from going into this hole. And every time you fire it, that solenoid pops that little spring back and allows a little bit of air to pass through and basically fires the gun. This part back here is just simply a spacer for the back of the gun, and this part up here is the actual valve assembly, okay, that you see in a standard autococker. If you take this apart, it's just a simple poppet assembly, hole in the middle for the air to pass through, and every time that spring kicks that back, all it does is it opens it up, allows the air to vent up, and fires the gun. A little spring to help it reset, and a couple of different O-rings to help seal it all together. So that's the MQ1. I was one of the original adopters of it, thought it was pretty good, had quite a few problems with consistency though. So let's take a look at the MQ2 now. So you can see, much better design in my opinion, more finished. One of the number one things that they did was they put a plastic sheath around the wires so as to avoid sheared wires, as was a problem with the MQ1. They've anodized it, used higher quality brass, and one of the biggest things that I like over the MQ1 was the MQ1, all it has is a little set screw right there to keep the solenoid together. Some people, when they'd put it in, as you'll see later, used to crush the solenoid, because when they'd put the back plate in, they'd start tightening it up, and boom, they'd crush it. With the MQ2, what we've got here is a sealed assembly. Okay, this unscrews like this, and on the inside is where you find the solenoid assembly that we saw in the MQ1. Okay, it's a little bit, actually quite a bit nicer design over the old MQ1. Okay, put this back together. Alright, let's take a look at the valve here. In my opinion, a much better valve design as well. Brass instead of aluminum. If you take a look here, here is the inside of the valve. A little bit better. They use a disc instead of an O-ring right here, as well as a little nut to help keep it on. Just a whole lot better design. Put all this back together. Okay. The MQ2 no longer supports Racegun actively, so when it came, mine had a connector for a E-blade on it, which is just a little bit too big for the Racegun. One thing that I discovered is that a BIOS backup battery for laptops, they all pretty much use the same two-prong connector that the Racegun uses. I'm a computer tech, so I have lots of them around. I just cut one off, soldered it back in, used a little bit of heat shrink to get it all back together, and there you go. One thing before we install this real quick that I will recommend, if you read the MQ's installation instructions, I bypassed this the first time and I had a lot of problems. There usually comes a white spacer right there on the plunger, okay? in between the spring and that. And what that is for is it's for short-bodied guns, shorter than even the race gun, midgetized cockers, microed, and stuff like that, where they don't have enough volume, and basically you're going to go for a higher pressure, lower volume setup. Now, the downside to it is that when I was running it with it in my gun, I got terrible consistency. Some shots would fire, other shots wouldn't. It was pretty terrible and worthless. Took me about a week to realize that was still in there. Once I removed it, flawless performance from then on out. So let's install it. Move this old crummy MQ1 out. Okay, Racegun half block, standard stuff. I'm just going to take the entire valve assembly and going to go ahead and slide it into the body. Okay. Check back there, make sure that I'm all on camera here. Okay, the important thing is to line up the hole, okay, so that when you screw the securing nut in there, that the valve isn't off. Otherwise you'll crush it if you over tighten it too much. So this is how I do it. I generally will set it in there, pull out my wrench, and I tighten it to where I can feel the valve tightening. Then I take the spacer, I slide it in the body, and I use another Allen wrench to push on it and make sure that it's snug in there, and then I do the final tightening. Okay? Don't want to over tighten that at all, just enough to keep it in there. About that far is good for me. That's how I do it. Okay? From there, take the body, and this is kind of a tricky part. You take the wires and you slide the wires in first, feed it through the hole, and just put it in there, kind of snug it up. Alright, and after that, the spacer goes in last with the void space on the outside. So the hole faces the outside of the gun, the flat spot faces the inside. Now, here is the tricky part. Start screwing your IVG in. I'm doing this all backwards here on camera. There we go. Take a small Allen wrench, and you're going to want to tip the gun up and put it in the hole where the wires go. Because as soon as you start turning this, it is going to want to turn the valve with it, and if you don't have this Allen wrench securing it, you'll rotate, and even with the covering, it's easy to shear off wires. Okay? Once that's done, you snug it down decently tight, and voila, your MQ2 is now installed. Just a couple of things to note that I found with mine. Every time you take apart that valve assembly, the solenoid assembly, to take out, let's say, that plastic O-ring, you'll find that it might leak for about 1,000 or so shots, because what's happened, and I'll show you on this old valve here, is this disc right here will have gotten a groove in it. Well, if you take it out and twist it, now the groove doesn't line up perfectly, and so while you're firing the first couple thousand shots, it's having to dig a new groove in the front of that urethane disc. And so for a little while you might get a couple of leaks. The other thing that I found, it does take a little while to break the MQ in. Once it's broke in, it's great. I had great efficiency last weekend when I played, much better than my standard valve assembly. I've got about a 6 millisecond dwell and a 6 millisecond shot for my timing settings. If you go any lower than that, or at least with mine, it wouldn't shoot at all. It's about 270 to 290 pounds. The gun is pretty picky. With an MQ, you can't just, crank it up 30 or 40 pounds. You'll either get venting out the back, or it won't fire at all. So it's pretty quick, pretty easy to find that sweet spot and figure out what you need to do. Aside from that, I think it's a great product. Decreased blowback, decreased kick, just overall something fun to play with. Another thing to keep me in the game, playing a cocker and showing up all these other people who don't even know what these things are anymore. So if you've got any questions, feel free to post on the forums, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you've got about the MQ2 valve. Thank you, and have a good one.